We now come to Kesia Lyng. It sounds to me a very sad story. She put herself forward back in 2002 to be one of the trials, one of the guinea pigs for the Gardasil vaccine in Denmark. And she became very unwell during that trial. And, her symptoms were just dismissed by the trial investigators. And her details went unrecorded. And this is now her own story of how she got into that trial and how she was treated.
This is on? Yeah. I don't have a slide with me. If you want to read more about my story, there was an article that came out in December 2017 in Slate magazine. So if you Google Slate and Gardasil, you'll find my story. You can see all the documents. But thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. It's been really inspiring, and I've also been very emotional listening to the different speakers, and it's been a lot of information. So thank you for sticking out so long. I am 34 years old. I'm married to my husband, who is here supporting me. We have 2 kids, a son who's 9 and a daughter who's 7. And we live just outside Copenhagen. So in 2002, it's almost 16 years ago, I received a letter with an invitation to participate in this clinical trial. It described this vaccine, the revolutionary vaccine that could prevent cervical cancer. I found it very intriguing and very exciting. I was 18 back then, and 6 months earlier, my grandmother had passed away from cervical cancer. So it was just, and it was a really big loss for my family. It had been a nasty fight. So when I read this information, I read about the vaccine. I was like, no doubt, I want to participate. I read through the whole folder, the brochure. I read that it was not a safety study. It was an efficacy study. It was to test if the vaccine actually worked. That it said that there had been prior safety studies, and it had shown that there were no side effects other than a little stinging and redness at the injection site. So I thought, well, I'm not putting my whole health and life at risk. I felt it was safe to participate. My parents, though, were very skeptical, but I was 18, and I was able to decide this for myself. And I was a student back then, and we were giving 54 euros at each visit. That was also a big motivation, since as a student you don't have a lot of money. So when I was elected to join, it was very exciting. I was very proud, and so in the September 2002, I had my first shot. I went to the hospital where the trial was and talked to the staff and filled out a lot of forms. There was a big requirement that we had to be healthy, the girls participating. So I wrote down my family history of illness, but I was found healthy and could participate. So after my first shot, of course, my arm hurt, and I felt a little strange in my body, and not dizzy, but just off. And it went away, and 2 months later in November, I was in to get my second shot, and I was excited and nervous and chatty, and talked to the staff, and yeah, just excited to be in this. I had the same reaction, but I was a bit more dizzy after the second shot. Yeah, I thought it was just that's normal vaccine reaction. Just got a vaccine. But I also, after 2 weeks, started noticing that I became much more tired. I woke up in the morning with aches in my body and my muscles. My joints would just feel stiff and weak, and I started having a headache that I've never experienced before. It was like a helmet being pulled over my head, and nothing would help. It wasn't a migraine because it was in both sides. It didn't help to rest. It didn't help to go out in the sun. It was just there. I could lower it by resting, but it didn't go away. I thought I was coming down with some flu-like thing. But after a while, it started really affecting my daily life. I went to my doctor, and I told him my symptoms. I said, this is odd. Is it the winter season? What is it? I had a hard time falling asleep. I had a hard time staying asleep. And all of these symptoms, the headache, the fatigue, the joint pains, muscle pains, it was just really tiring. I told him that I had a hard time just biking to school. In Copenhagen, we bike everywhere. And it was my transportation around the city. But that 10-minute ride to school would just take out all my energy. So he took a lot of tests. He was also concerned, but yeah, but they came back negative. There were nothing in my blood samples to answer why I had this. I experienced meeting with friends, hanging out, started to become hard. I used to several times a week bike 45 minutes into Copenhagen and 45 minutes back. And I would hang out with friends, and I was used to that. That was like just my daily routine almost. But now I had to, when I got into the city, I had to find a cafe and rest, or a park bench. I've been to so many park benches sleeping through these years, or in my younger years, simply just to be able to take me home again. So when I was closing up on getting my third shot, I started being nervous. Is this something to do with the vaccine? Because nothing else had changed. My doctors couldn't find out anything, and so this was the difference in my life. So I talked to the staff. I told them about my symptoms. I told them that this is new. My doctor can't find out what it was. They were busy noting down things in their journal. They needed to keep track of what vaccine shot I got and all that. So I felt that they barely listened to me, and they said that it's not that kind of side effects we see from this vaccine. And they didn't note down what I wrote or what I told them. I thought, well, they're doctors. There was a nurse and a doctor. They must know. So I was reassured, and I got the third shot. After that, I immediately got much worse. And 9 days later, I had to went to see my doctor. I told him this is getting worse. It was daily, just so tired. I had to quit school. I told him that I was in a clinical trial, a blinded clinical trial with a vaccine, and he was alarmed. He was like, "What? Have you talked to the staff?" I said, "Yeah, I've talked to them. They said it's not that kind of side effects you see. And he's like, you need to talk to them. And he noted that in my journal and used 2 exclamation signs when he noted it. So that made me nervous. I didn't want it to be the vaccine because I had signed up to do this. I wanted to be a part of something where if this vaccine worked, it could prevent cervical cancer, it could prevent others from going through what my grandmother did, what I did, losing someone to cervical cancer. But 3 weeks later, I had my next appointment at the clinical site. I was nervous. I didn't want to accuse the vaccine. I didn't want to confront doctors, but I did. I told them, this is getting worse. This is affecting my whole life. I'm barely managing school. I'm barely managing my exams I had at that time. They listened. They asked a bit of questions. They wrote down some things I didn't see. But again, they dismissed. And they said that, it's been tested, it's safe, this must be something else. And they wished me luck in finding out what it was. I was sitting in front of doctors. I was 19 then, I just turned 19. It was confusing. And I didn't bring my parents, I was just there on my own. Very strong will, I did this on my own. But I had to believe them. I thought, then it must be something else. That's what they're saying. I went home to my mom and argued, but they're saying it's not vaccines. So cut it out. Stop asking me about this. So I went back to my own doctor. I got to see a lot of doctors, a lot of specialists. They took tests for arthritis, for thyroid problems, for fibromyalgia, which I was told, you're 19, so you can't have fibromyalgia. That's 40 plus women who get that. It was very confusing. I had good days where I felt like, wow, no headache. I need to get out. I need to meet my friends and go into the city. And after that, I would crash. I was like, what is wrong with me? I had many bad days. I had mostly bad days. And I could see my friends just living their life, 180 miles an hour, doing education, going out, having fun. And I couldn't. I felt stumbling ahead. I had quit school. I had many odd jobs. I had to go down in hours because I couldn't keep up. And I was moving around because I couldn't afford the rent. I met my husband. We got married in 2006. It was hard for him to understand what's going on. But you're fine now, you can cook, you can invite home friends, and then you're crashing. And then I'm here cleaning up and pulling you out. When we had kids, it got so much worse because the responsibility got higher. We had rent, I had to get the kids to daycare, pick them up, cooking, cleaning, washing. It was like running marathons several times a day. And I would often call my husband crying, saying, you have to pick up the kids. I can't. I got home from work and I couldn't move. I was just in bed, aching, and it was a really, really rough time. And my doctor was at a loss of what to do. We had tried so many things. I had got an ADD diagnosed because some of the symptoms looks like ADD, but I didn't respond well to the medicine. It made me worse, and it gave me a lot of energy when it was working, but I crashed even more. So, yeah, I had several periods of being on sick leave, and my work was like, we really like you, we really want to keep you, but what's going on? So I was in 2016, April, I was at a point where it's like, I've run out of things to figure out. So one evening we're watching the news, my husband and I see a girl talking about her symptoms, how they started right after she got the HPV vaccine, after her second shot. And the way what she was describing was me. It was my story. It's exactly the same. And it felt like the carpet was just pulled out from underneath me. And I remember so clear when the symptoms started, back then when I attended that clinical trial. It's always been at the back of my mind. It's always been something I couldn't get rid of. Like, I couldn't just shake that off. Like, it was so weird, so, yeah, odd. And how the staff just dismissed it. Just dismissed that it had anything to do. They didn't even do tests. They didn't take a blood sample. They didn't do a neurological examination, nothing. So I started digging. I called the hospital. I tried to get my protocol out. They wouldn't help me. I got my doctor's journal out, and I could see what he had written. I could see I was barely sick at all before, and after everything started. I found 5 other women in Denmark who had also been in the trials. They were from all different clinical sites all over Denmark, who had also gotten sick during the trials, and who had never had any help either. I met Dr. Nielsen in January 17, and it was so I was so relieved to finally find a doctor who understood, who said, I've seen you before, I've seen others of you before. And he had answers. He had, we believe this is what it is. Like, and he explained a lot of things, and it just made sense. I was contacted by Frederick Golding, the journalist who's Danish, and he was digging into it. He got our protocols out from the study. He was threatening them with legal action, so he got them out. And we found that they had not registered my symptoms. They had not registered any of what we said. They were only, they only had to register the first 14 days after each vaccination. So if I were to faint on the 16th day and keep fainting, they didn't have to register it as a side effect. What they registered in my case, they registered as new medical history, which has nothing to do with the vaccine, and therefore it's not in any of the slides you've seen today from the clinical trials. So I felt outraged. I felt like, what? They had my health in their hands. They decided my health. I found out that the placebo that we were told for saline placebo was not. I said, what? You see all the reports from the clinical trial. None of me and the other women that I found from the clinical trials are in those numbers up there with the side effects that the Merck did register. And that's just in Denmark, that we're not in it. I saw the authorities just dismiss these girls and claiming that they had science. They had the clinical trials that proved that this vaccine was safe. I was like, wait a minute, I was in that trial. It said in the brochure it was not a safety study. This was an efficacy study. That it said that safety studies had been done before. Why are they using the study that I was in now referring to it as a safety study. That was not the deal. That was not what I signed up for. That was not what I was told. So today and these last 2 years, it's been heartbreaking to see so many young girls going through the same thing that I went through. And to just being betrayed by the authorities, to be betrayed by their doctors, not to receive any help. It's our girls. It's all of your girls. It's like we're a society. It could be my daughter too. It could be my friend's daughter. How can they just dismiss it? How can they just act the way they do and not give any help? And so so that's what I've did. Yeah, I want to end up in saying that they never have proven that I didn't get sick from this vaccine. They never proved it. They never tested me. They never did. They just didn't register my symptoms. And they can't use that and just dismiss all of your girls on that. That's not right. Thank you.